The year 2021 has been fully figured out with plans and arrangements and agreements for the full activation of the economic potential of the Nigerian economy as the country enters the new year with the heavy winds of recession. In a bid to reduce headwinds in the new year and create an enabling atmosphere where business, industry, services and commerce will thrive. The Nigerian government has embarked on key regulatory reforms as captured in the provisions of the 2020 Finance Bill, which proposes the amendment of 13 different laws with over 70 sections. Now, for the Nigerian economy to survive, for Nigerian economy to drive towards the path of sustainable growth and development in 2021, experts say the federal government must give more attention to key sectors of the economy, such as service sector, agriculture sector, manufacturing sector, through infrastructure development, as well as implement a comprehensive reform that cuts across these areas to hasten Nigeria's economic recovery and position her economic trajectory on an inclusive path going forward. Now, to discuss this more, I won't be doing it alone as usual. Since there are issues surrounding Nigerian economic outlook for 2021, I have joining me live via Skype is the West African tax leader at Deloitte, Mr. Yomi Olugbenro. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Yomi Olugbenro.
Good afternoon, Tolu. Good to be on your show.
Yes, so it's been a while, and a happy new year to you.
Happy New Year to you and to the team there.
Thank you so very much. I know you've been seeing a lot of figures, both from IMF and World Bank, and even from our own local figures as agencies are talking about the MBS and all of that, reeling out figures of projections for 2021. Let's do an assessment of what we've seen in 2020 and what we should expect in 2021. What are your expectations, basically, before we go into some specifics?
Well, I think it's appropriate to brace up for another very challenging year in 2021 from an economic side, because if you get into a year, with recession, so you have a lot of work to do to get the economy back on its feet and to ensure that you get back to the positive growth. But if you situate that within the current climate, the COVID-19 pandemic is still here with us, and there are fears around a second wave of it. And you look at the headroom that Nigeria has got from a fiscal spending or from a budgetary perspective, and the tough task in raising revenue to be able to do that, you will know that it's a year that we really need to brace up for some challenging times. I'm particularly I've been particularly looking at, many of the plans around, the budgetary spending, for example, and all of the plans around economic recovery and growth. That it's hinged on government being able to mobilize all of the funds and all of the resources that it needs to be able to put into those critical sectors, that you mentioned. And that's going to be a challenging one. So we're bracing up for a tough year. But with all said and done, if we put our hearts together and focus aggressively based on the plan that we see the government rolling out, expectations are that by the time we are ending 2021, we should have the recession behind us. So the growth may still be very fragile, but we will end 2021 on a positive GDP growth rate.
I love that level of optimism. Everyone is saying that 2021 would be a year that Nigeria will exit recession and witness gradual or marginal growth. But I'm worried about revenue, because revenue is key for a country like Nigeria to achieve expectations of the budget and all that we need to do as a country. Now, we've seen the Finance Act coming to support government in all of this. What do you really make about the shortfall in revenue? And how do you see us, one way or the other, bridging that gap vis-a-vis the positives of the Finance Act 2020?
No, I totally agree with you that I think the biggest of the challenge that Nigeria will continue to deal with in 2021 is the deficit of revenue. If you look at the budget for 2021, we're planning to raise below 8 trillion. I think the actual number is about 7.8 trillion naira out of the potential spending of over 13 trillion. So that's a deficit of more than 5 trillion, which is only going to come from borrowing, both local and international. And there isn't any guarantee based on our trajectory that even the 7.8 trillion naira revenue that we plan to make, that we'll be able to achieve it 100%. We have never done that in the recent past. And so the entirety of that revenue itself, even if we achieve it, will probably not be able to cover the recurrent and debt servicing obligation, because look at the budget numbers. If you take away the capital spending and you add the recurrent expenditure and debt servicing, including the sinking fund, you're going to get over maybe something around 9.5 trillion naira. Meanwhile, the total revenue we are intending to make from oil, from non-oil, from independent sources, and other sources of fund to the government is below 8 trillion naira. So the bulk of the recovery plan is hinged around the capital spending that is tied to borrowing. And so that is the crux of the challenge that I think we will have to deal with. And of the plan around economic recovery, every optimism that everyone has expressed around the country getting out of recession, maybe towards the third or fourth quarter of the year, each of those plans is put around the possibility that government will be able to marshal the revenue, the 13 trillion, that the federal government had planned, and that we will be able to make all of that. But I have my fears, I have my doubts if you judge by our trajectory. So the bulk of the effort that I believe the Minister of Finance and revenue generating agencies of government needs to be focusing on is how do we aggressively shore up the revenue? How do we ensure that mobilizing enough revenue that the government needs to finance all of its plans for 2021 is achieved? That will be critical, but that's a tough one if you consider that we're still in a pandemic. We're still at a time when full opening of the economy, we can't really go all out in that particular way. So we still need to have strike some bit of balance between safety and health precautions and opening up the economy for the funds and for the resources that we need.
Well said there. No, Mr. Yomi, let's look at the focus now. Many are saying, experts are saying that Nigeria needs to focus on services sector, agricultural sector, manufacturing sector, and of course, infrastructure development. We've seen what's played out all around, from the central bank's intervention to almost all of these sectors, improving manufacturing, even the pharmaceutical sector, 100 billion naira. We've seen the agricultural sector, a lot of schemes. We can go on and on, fertilizer here, seedlings, and all of that to improve all of these sectors. Now, for you, what would you say? Would you say the fiscal is also doing enough to complement these efforts? That is very key at this time.
Well, we can always do more, and I think one of the challenges that a number of experts usually will highlight is the synchronization of the various policy measures. So whether you're talking monetary or you are talking fiscal, but if you go back a little to the critical sector that you did mention, why is it so? Why is everyone saying, or why is government saying we want to focus on service, we want to focus on manufacturing, we want to make sure that we build infrastructure? The reason is very simple. These are the sectors that can help us generate enough employment. We're dealing with high unemployment. So vast majority of Nigerians are, operating within the service sector. Analyze the GDP of the country and see the quantum, the size of the service sector. So if we really want to make significant change, we need to focus on areas where we can generate significant amount of employment. And those are the key areas: manufacturing, service sector, agriculture. These are the areas where we can, get enough of Nigerians occupied and busy, and then we focus on infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, that is, because this is the engine for the economic growth. So, but the linkage to the government spending, and all of that, it's also a reflection of the kind of imbalance we have in our public service and in our government structure. If you look at the budget, we say we want to focus on manufacture, we want to focus on agriculture, we want to focus on service sector. Analyze the budget and see whether the relative share of this critical sector is sufficient to be able to galvanize the kind of development. The answer is no. In spite of the effort, in spite of the best intention, so we need to be able to match our words with the actions. We need to be able to make sure that we continue to rebalance and recalibrate the entirety of the budget to make sure that the recurrent spending, it continues to go down the way it's been going, and that we continue to channel a lot more resources until we get to a point where the amount of internally generated revenue, whether oil, non-oil, or other sources, there is a significant part of that can go into capital spending. We won't be out of the woods. If you do the analysis currently, we don't have that. We don't have that in our budget currently. The entirety of our revenue is still servicing debt and is still servicing recurrent. And we base each of those priority spending is hinged on being able to borrow, and the debt servicing obligation is increasing. So until we do that rebalancing and recalibration of our budget and ensure that from internally generated revenue, from the little that we're able to garner internally, we're able to do a lot more than just pay salaries. We're able to do a lot more than service our debt, that a portion of that can be reserved for capital spending, and not that the entirety of it must come from borrowing. We won't be where we need to be over a long period.
Mr. Yami, I don't know if you also like to share your views, or maybe give us your expertise, because it has to do with talking about a Finance Act, and now as it is, what do you think are the positives of this? Yes, ease of doing business, help government to show up more revenue to help budget actualization of the 2021 budget. What more do we have, talking about some changes in various tax acts that we now see?
Right. I think the Finance Act, essentially, for if you were to summarize it, is essentially supposed to provide some bit of significant provisions therein are essentially providing the complementary policy initiative that you need at a time when a lot of businesses are struggling because of the impact of COVID-19 and the impact of the economic recession that we're facing. You did mention in your intro, I think there are about 13 or 14 different laws that were actually amended. Most of the provisions relating to tax are actually providing cushion and some bit of relief or some bit of palliative to the taxpayer, whether you are an individual taxpayer or you're a corporate taxpayer. The bulk of the changes that we have there are essentially supposed to be providing some bit of relief. Government reduced, for example, minimum tax provision that was introduced in the last 2020 Finance Act. Have that from 0.5% to 0.25%. That singular provision alone is a significant relief to many of the taxpayers who are likely going to be paying minimum tax in a year when the bottom line is probably nil or probably in the red or in the negative. So provisions like that, or to individuals who are having compensation for loss of employment, where the government says if you receive up to 10 million naira, it is tax-free, and it's only any benefit you receive over and above of that is going to be liable to tax. So a number of the provisions that you have from the Finance are actually supposed to be those that the corporate taxpayers or the taxpayers generally will applaud. But this is necessary, because the current climate is such that the tax-paying public are already pressed down by the impact of job losses, the impact of the recession, and only very few sectors, are thriving. The ICT, the financial services, and a number of the businesses that are actually, significantly powered, by the web, by e-commerce. So we needed all of that for this year, and so from a government revenue standpoint, most of the amendments are essentially supposed to create almost a reduction, and the counterbalance is only going to come in the efficiency with which the revenue authorities are going to run tax administration in the year, because we still have a significant gap of the untaxed public. We still have a significant low level of tax penetration. So where the government is only going to be able to bridge the gap or the losses from the benefit provided to the taxpayer from the Finance Act, it's only going to come when the system of tax administration is improved, the enforcement mechanism is enhanced, and that a lot of the leakages that is happening within the system is blocked. That's the only way that we can get as much revenue as we will expect in 2021 from a non-oil tax revenue perspective.
An expert's view there. Well said and well broken down. Before I let you go, Mr. Olugbero, I'm a fan of diversification, but I don't want to be one of those that will just talk about diversification and not act it. How well are we really trying to diversify our economy? Because at the moment, contributions from the oil and non-oil sector, there seems to be not very significant contribution from that non-oil side, which is where we need to improve at this time.
No, it's totally correct. I think the prognosis and the analysis of the Nigerian economy and what we need to do hasn't changed over the last number of years. What we haven't done is to actually drive the implementation of many of these initiatives. I mean, I have been hearing for decades now that Nigeria needs to reduce its dependence on oil and diversify the economy. But as we speak today, that is still one of the major steps and major initiatives that the government needs to, aggressively implement. Oil is still accounting for maybe close to 75% or 80% of our foreign exchange. It's still accounting for more than half of government revenue. And so anything that happened in that particular sector practically bring Nigeria to its knees. And government can possibly deliver on this mandate alone without recognizing and aggressively pursuing private sector-led economic growth. I think that is the main engine. I think a number of times we assume that it is the government itself that will drive the diversification. Government role in the economy essentially is to provide the platform and the enabling environment and allow the private sector to be the engine for the growth and to lead the growth. That's what we need to do so that government could concentrate and channel the limited available resources to security and ensuring that there is safety of life and of businesses, and continue to churn out reforms and initiatives that will ensure that foreign direct investment can come in, the local businesses can thrive, and the economy can continue to widen up. So that has remained our issue, and that remains an agenda even for today.
Very key there, Mr. Yomi Olugbero. This is a good way to leave it. I must thank you very much for your time. He's a West African tax leader at Deloitte. I appreciate you joining us on Business Nigeria today. I really do.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.